Zombie Tech. Welcome to Zombie Tech, a forum for engineers, scientists, and inventors to ponder on the technologies needed to survive the inevitable zombie apocalypse.
She's Addie.
He's Whisker.
And today, calling directly from the zombie apocalypse, or so the quality of the connection may sound, we have Mr. John Cohn from IBM. And
I dare say, is it Dr. John Cohn?
Is it?
Only people who want money call me that.
So technically a doctor. A doctor of being on the colony more recently.
I'm a doctor of zombology.
Awesome.
Oh, there's a zombie now. I can turn that off. Anyway.
That's awesome.
You guys, it's great. It's great to be here. You know, I'm keeping the zombies at bay. I've got a shovel here, so if you hear a couple of whacks, it's going for the head.
Got it. Well, thank you for taking your time out of your very busy schedule to come and talk to us. I know that there are many things to be slaughtered, so.
There's no higher, calling for a geek to actually be on a show about the zombie apocalypse. I mean, I am so honored. If those kids who made fun of me on the playground ever knew,
they'd be begging to get into your zombie bunker.
There you go.
High school reunion bragging rights. I like it.
Yeah, let me turn this off. My zombie alert thing. All right. They seem to have found something else to feed on. Okay.
So I would just love to know your story. How you started as an engineer, up to the colony, and then of course we're going to ask you all sorts of fangirly questions about the colony, and we'll go from there.
That sounds great. So you want the short, let's see, I was born on a snowy day in 1959 in Archway, New York. All right, actually, so I was born in New York. My folks, my dad was a promoter, kind of marketing guy, and he got this job offer to go down and work for the baseball club of all things in Houston, Texas. So when I was 3 or 4, I guess I was just about to turn 4, we moved down to Houston, and which is like the proverbial good place to be from. It's a nice place, but it's hot and gross. But the one thing, so I grew up there, to the extent that I grew up, in the middle of the total space craziness. So think about 1959, the year, Sputnik came by.
Yeah.
I went to school, even though we lived in the west kind of part of Houston. For some reason, that's where all the astronauts, a lot of them lived, even though NASA was kind of on the other side of the planet. And it was, I remember seeing these things. It was always huge news whenever there was, like a Gemini or Mercury or Apollo kind of thing, and I just was totally jazzed by that.
Yeah.
And then my folks actually got to know a couple of the astronauts, and I remember, like Ed White. He was one of the guys that, tragically died in a launch pad fire. But I remember he came over to my house. It was so cool, and I was showing him some sort of crap robot pretend thing that I had made. But it was probably around, I think I was 8 or something like that my mom swears I said, I want to be an engineer.
Oh.
God knows how I knew what that was. But the whole space thing really mattered to me a lot. And,
sure.
And so they were kind of like my sports hero guys, especially since I got to really see them, and went to school with their kids and stuff. So I did the whole real nerdy guy, not good at sports, but, had the laboratory in the garage, made stuff, blew stuff up. Funny story there is, so I did that all the way through, high school. When I went away to college in Boston, I kept coming back. Houston was still my base. Then when my folks decided to sell the house, well, they moved to Boston. They live in Boston now, near Boston. I just said, well, maybe I ought to come and see what's in the garage there from the old lab. And there were at least two things that would have made the news if the bottles had not seen. I was like, holy, I can't swear. Holy anybody who's, sodium peroxide, there's a good one if you want to look it up. But not a good thing to have loose. And red fuming nitric acid. And the labels had come off, so that was pretty good.
Oh, man.
But anyway, so I spent, a pretty, I had a pretty idyllic, upbringing, two doting parents, two doting siblings. They're pretty good doters. I have a baby brother, year and a half younger, who is a really, world-renowned cardiac surgeon, cardiothoracic surgeon.
That's awesome.
And I was telling you about that a bit ago before the zombie apocalypse.
Yep.
And an inventor. So he was kind of like my big partner in crime. We did a lot of stuff in terms of blowing things up and, shocking friends and various other things. So that we continue to have a really good invention collaboration. And my baby sister is 8 years younger and is the only sane one among us. She's a lawyer. And my folks, my dad, as I said, was in marketing. My mom, when I was a wee zygote, I guess I was in high school, she would, she went back to law school, which was really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've heard of skipping grades, but high school already as a zygote? Well, you're quite the overachiever, aren't you?
I was an advanced zygote. Haven't you ever heard that about, in Judaism, it's okay to have to have an abortion up until your kid gets into medical school?
I see.
Oh, wait, no epic humor. That's no zombie jokes. So anyway, my family, my parents were not scientific, but they were like totally into whatever we were into. So they were really supportive. They continue to be. And so we never lacked for, I remember I had my first Texas Instruments calculator, and I wore it around on my belt for all the world to see.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's pretty embarrassing when you think about it. But, when you don't know how to talk to girls. But anyway, thank goodness I fell into a bad crowd around 17 or 18, and that made I became somewhat social when I don't know why I became social, but somehow I normalized a little bit before I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I did say I remember my mom also saying that around that 8-year-old that I wanted to go to MIT. And I don't even know how the hell I knew what MIT was, but I did like many of my generation that were under the Sputnik craze. I showed up saying, hey, I want to be a rocket scientist. They said, sorry, rocket science is full. You can be an electrical engineer. No, I was always building stuff. I really like chemistry and electronics the most. But, and I made a lot of things. And so I really wanted to be an electronics geek. So I went to MIT. It was really great because, I grew up in Houston. I mean, my mom's from Ohio, and we'd go up there occasionally, and I remember seeing snow there, and I remember being dragged kicking and screaming to Colorado to go skiing, but, of course, that was too much like sport.
Right.
But for the most part, I didn't have a lot of experience with snow or cold. And I remember going to MIT and, Boston, 70, must have been the winter of 78, getting out of a bus after winter break, climbing over a hill, and realizing it was a car. And I was like, wow. Which sort of explains, I love cold weather. I love snow. I don't like heat. And if any of you have ever been to Houston,
that's just, yeah.
One day in January, it's like a broiler there.
Yep.
And so that's why I live in northern Vermont. But anyway, I went to MIT, and it was just totally the most awesome. I don't think I would have ever said this while I was there, but I loved MIT. It was just like so intellectually alive, just an awesome place. I did pretty well there, and I did a lot of hobby stuff. But that's where things started to get kind of interesting because I found out I really liked the arts, and I liked that kind of stuff. So I did a lot of work I ended up taking these jobs for the visual arts group, the group that now is called the Media Lab there.
Yep.
ACT UP. So I did a lot of electronics and hacking. I learned to do glass blowing and welding and stuff like that there. And so I would do a lot of techie stuff for artists and musicians that weren't techie, and I just kind of made up for the fact that I wasn't artistic. But you know what? That's where I got the first taste of anti-zombification, because I realized that my tech skills, while I was most likely going to be zombie fodder because I'm funny, I realized that, that a good, technical defense is is tradable for, continued survival. So I thought, okay, that's my play. I'm going to be the smart guy that they have to have with us, who is vulnerable, the soft, soft, squishy inside, but is, necessary. If you think about it, that archetype is very popular in movies and cartoons where they have the nerdy guy who is absolutely essential to the plot.
Yeah.
So I kind of went with that. Anyway, so MIT was great. I totally loved it. Maybe this is too much detail.
No.
I'm almost there. Okay, so around my junior year, I kind of took that. It was the first time I sort of took a breath, and paused since that age 8 decision that I wanted to be an engineer, and I said, WTF, is this really for me?
Mm-hmm.
So I decided I'd take a year as an exchange student. So I went and studied history in Austria.
Wow.
Because, and MIT didn't even have an exchange program, so I became a Wellesley student for a year.
Wait.
Was really awesome.
Pause. Because I am a Wellesley alum.
No way.
Yes. I can't believe you did it through Wellesley.
Yes, I'm a Wellesley student. I'm a Wellesley alum, and I'm not going to, because you just told me that, I'm not going to tell any of the stories of why I decided to go to Wellesley all the time. No. Do you remember what they called that bus? Yeah,
they still call it that.
Yeah. But anyway, that was awesome, actually. And it was really fun. So I took a year in Austria and learned another language and non-techie classes. But again, kind of going towards the zombie theme, I learned a lot about psychology and things like that, history, psychology, stuff like that. And that actually made, what I realized is how much I love engineering. I really do. Mm-hmm. I'm a real geek. But it also made me realize that, it was good to be interested in other things, like philosophy and psychology and girls, wine, and stuff like that.
Right.
So that was very rounding. Then I came back, and which is interesting because I didn't get engineering. I didn't get any credit for the year abroad, but it was definitely one of the coolest things I did. Awesome. So I ended up, I went back and I said, so I doubled up on my classes. So I graduated from MIT in 3 years, which was really a good thing to do because everything I've done since has been easy. That was hard. That was really hard. So anyway, part of that, though, is, I was never really mindful of stuff, so I got to, near graduation, and all my friends had bought their cheesy suits and were interviewing with companies, and I really hadn't thought it through. I kind of thought I'd take some time off and figure it out, and then I realized financially that was probably not a great idea. So it's a long story. I had a friend from Houston, a woman who actually, ironically, lives near me in Vermont now. Well, it's not that ironic. She had gone to University of Vermont, good friend, just a platonic. And I would go up, I'd hitchhike up to, let me parenthetically say, if any of my kids are listening, I'm not recommending that you hitchhike. But I got to Vermont and, hang out with her, and that's how I fell in love with Vermont. But I also met a girl, and I fell in like with her for a couple of weeks. But when I went up to visit her once at a party, I heard that there was an IBM in Vermont, and I said, gee, I need a job. So I called, and they invited me in, and I went back to MIT, got a cheesy suit, came back up, walked in, got the job that essentially, truth be told, I have today. I've had that same job for 30 years. That's the only interview I've ever had.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun. It's fun, and they've been very, very good to me. So, I worked there for a while, and Vermont is just it's the opposite of Houston. I mean, in many ways. I mean, I like, not that I want to diss Houston, but Vermont's just awesomeness completely. And so it was, it's green and it's small. I live in a town of about 600 people,
Nice.
near a town of 3,000 people. And so to be able to do really high-tech stuff and live in that kind of, in Oz is really cool.
Yep.
So I got up there, started working. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
So what I was working in is chips. I really like making chips, and I was in the background. My background was the kind of materials that chips are made out of, silicon stuff. Kind of like easy bake oven, putting them in the oven and stuff. But I got this great job working on a laser, drilling holes and stuff with a laser, which back in 1981 was pretty high tech.
Right.
But then the laser broke down, and I was like really bumming. And they said, "Oh, that's okay. While you're waiting, why don't you write some software here?" It was a program to check whether the design was correct. And I went, "Software? I hate software." And that's what I've done for the last 30 years. But so they've been really good. IBM is a big place, but I really have liked it. They one cool thing is the second year I was there, they issued me a wife. Diane, who you saw in the colony.
Yep.
Her dad worked at IBM for like 34 years. Was still a machinist in Endicott, and so she's second generation. She's also an engineer,
Nice.
and so that was really cool. And I really like the thing that's funny about a big company like that. You think, oh man, it's big and bureaucratic, and any big company has got those issues. But at the risk of sounding kind of cheesy about my company, what's really cool about the place is it's all over the world. They used to say IBM meant I've been moved, but I've had a chance. I've been to 50 countries for the company, and
Wow.
And we've got everything from particle physicists, Nobel-winning physicists, to business theorists and mathematicians, and all this cool stuff. And I've really enjoyed kind of surfing that, and I got a lot out of it. So some days it's really frustrating. It's a big place, but it's been kind of cool. But anyway, you want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll finish up pretty soon. So then Diane and I were dating, and I was working very closely with some guys in England, and I realized that this guy over there was doing basically the same job, so we rigged up this whole thing that we agreed to trade jobs. We traded cars, stereos, we kept our own girlfriends, and then we told our bosses, and we made this swap, and that was really awesome. Then I came back, and Diane and I got married, and then they decided I wasn't smart enough, and they sent me back for a PhD at Carnegie Mellon in computer engineering.
Yep.
And then our oldest kid, Max, was born right before that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back 3 years later. That was really fun. Actually, I really enjoyed grad school. Then came back. Then our second son, Sam, who was the one who passed away, was born in 92. And then our youngest son, Gabe, was born in 95, and 3 really cool kids. We live in an old schoolhouse in Vermont, and that's sort of what leads me to the college.
Great.
That was
excellent.
And for anyone that doesn't know what the Colony is yet, it was a TV show on Discovery, and basically they created a contained experiment where they dropped a bunch of clever people into a simulated post-apocalyptic landscape and had them attempt to survive off the things that they could find in the environment for, gosh, it must have been
10 weeks.
10 weeks.
Yeah, it was 10 weeks. And the only correction I would make is it was actually simulated people in a clever landscape. Not clever people. Yeah, it was pretty weird. That's right.
So how did you end up deciding to do it, and how?
I have to I have to drop back into storytelling mode to tell that, because I have to sort of pick up a thread of the story that I didn't tell you. Yeah,
oh,
what were you going to say?
No, that's fine.
So, the cool thing about having kids, I really love my kids, and but being the nerd that I am, when other dads were doing, tossing around a football. Wait, football's the oblong one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When they were doing that, I was like, I was such a klutz, and they were all snowboarders and crazy stuff like that. But the only skill I had was blowing stuff up, and you'd be surprised how easily amused a kid is with around explosions and big sparks. So I started actually in '92. I think was the first time I was just back to grad school. I started volunteering in schools. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine, an old MIT friend of mine, actually had volunteered to do something, and then at the last minute couldn't do it. He's a member of. We have this alumni group in Vermont called Vomit, Vermont's own MIT club, and he had said he was going to do it and he couldn't. So I went in and I did it, and I fell in love with being a science guy in schools. And as my kids got older, I started doing stuff. And Diane also in their classrooms, and then the word kind of caught on, and so I started doing all of this education outreach, pretty much locally, and then around the state, and then around the region, and then kind of around the country.
Right.
And IBM has a big program for supporting that, so they were always very, very, very supportive of that. So I was doing a lot of that, and really feel passionate about kids getting interested in science and engineering. Just for the sheer geekiness of it, but also to help the world, and of course, because it's going to be vitally important in the zombie apocalypse. Mm-hmm. And, that's an angle we should work. That's an angle that has been tried. It's usually that, you can make a lot of money and it's cheesy stuff like that. But the zombie apocalypse, that's the trump card. But anyway, I was doing this for a long time, and then as your listeners probably don't know this if they haven't watched the Colony. I mentioned it briefly a moment ago, and I don't mean to skip over it, but
no, that's fine.
Our middle son, Sam, when he was 14, was on a vacation and walked across the road and was hit by a car, and he was an organ donor, 4-way organ donor. So if any of you are out there, if you've ever, you can honor his memory, Sam's memory, by having that conversation with your family about organ donation, and we've done a lot of outreach around that. Yeah. And but what was it's really hard going through something like that. I can't put really good words around it. How to say this? So you have to do something to keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. And what the one thing, and I know this is heavy to hear, but it's central to this. The one thing that really felt good. And it really did feel good after Sam died, as I was trying to get my feet back on the ground for work and, kind of getting my cares about the world bit set back on, is doing this outreach stuff with kids, or with anybody, but, kids or adults, it didn't really matter, but kind of sharing that gee whiz thing about science and doing some, outrageous science stunts, flamethrowers, blowing things up in the honor of Sam, became really healing. And the more I did it, the more I felt good. And I think people around me were happy to see me kind of, it would bring joy back into my life. It continues to. So I was kind of in that, and it was about, it must have been 3 years after Sam died. It's about 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. I was trying to figure out this outreach thing. I was trying to figure out, where do I go with that? Do I just stay local? Do I try to do something bigger? And so I went to this is the truth. It was, I think it was probably December 7th or 8th in 2008. Mm-hmm. I remember a conversation. I had a glass of wine in my hand, and I went to Diane, and I said, beautiful hippie wife. She won't call herself a hippie, but she's very grounded, earth mother, really, really good soul, a good advisor, confidant. Yeah. I said, I really want to do something with this outreach, the science, because I really believe that science and engineering knowledge, whether you're a scientist or not an engineering person, is very helpful in a bunch. I think a lot of the issues that the world faces
right.
could be addressed by that. Energy and stuff like that. Not to mention the zombie apocalypse.
Of course.
Think of the problem. So I said to her, dear hippie wife, what do you think I should do to make this go? And she says, scruffy husband or whatever she said. I don't know. Just be open to it. Put it out to the cosmos. So I literally walked outside, had my glass of wine, and I looked up and I said, hey, Cosmos, what you got for me? I really did this stupid thing like that, And the next day, out of the blue, I get a call from this woman at this casting agency.
Yeah.
And she said, essentially, it was several calls, but it was essentially, do you want to be a scientist on TV? And I went, I don't know, sure. And I really started thinking about it. And, I'd like to say, I jumped at it, but I actually agonized over it and drove everybody around me crazy. I can tell you the story. That it was actually the couple of weeks, the sort of 2 months after that were very strange. You want to hear about that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I kind of went, gee, that would be great. Now, I have to admit, we don't have TV in our house in the sense that, we don't have cable or broadcast TV. Mm-hmm. And it's not like I'm a militant anti-TV person. It's quite the opposite. I am so hooked by anything. I'm so ADD that, if there's a flashing screen in front of me, I'm just like hooked. Like I remember I had a new boss, this woman, high-level director at IBM. I missed my first meeting with her watching MTV. Because, like the next one might have been good. I swear. So I'm like, I don't have it around. My kids, they grew up in a generation where you could watch it online. It's not like they're totally sheltered or anything.
Yep.
And, I watch it when I'm in a hotel, but I just don't have it at home because it's the same reason I rarely have crack cocaine at home. It's just like really.
Rarely?
Okay, never. We're not going there. Though, for bartering in the zombie apocalypse, you'd be surprised what you need to have to your kid. But, I had never seen, at the time, it's hard to imagine a world before Jersey Shore or Big Brother. Those weren't on, but I had never seen Survivor.
Sure.
And I had no clue what reality TV was. I did what most people would do in that circumstance. I'd combine those two words, and I said, well, it's TV. I know what that is. And reality, I don't have a great grasp of it, but I sort of know it when I see it. So, God, how could it be? And I had this kind of weird image of something between Mr. Wizard, what he was kind of like Mr. Rogers on Science. Mm-hmm. And I was a big fan of Beekman's World. Did you ever see that?
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, it turns out Paul Zaloom, Beekman, is a really good friend of mine now, which is that's been a blessing.
Real cool.
And, he's actually helped me tune my game a little bit because he's not a scientist, but he is a very good showman and a very good puppeteer. But that's a whole other story. But if you're out there, hey. I said, sure, I'll do this. And they said, okay, make a tape. So I said, okay, I'll make a tape. So I got my little cheesy VCR out, and I did some earnest. I did sort of what I did, it kind of dropped into the recording I gave to you about, kids need to be interested in science because generations, and I was raised in Sputnik and blah, blah, blah. and I had my blinking lights on, and I sent them the tape, and I was like, well, that was interesting. And they never got the tape. They lost it.
Oh.
I was like, what? I actually took it that the Cosmos was telling me, well, that was interesting. So I didn't really, and they said, well, they emailed me and they said, we didn't get your tape. And I said, well, that's okay. I said, no, do it again. So I did it again. And you know how like when you have to do something again, you just kind of do it with a different heart. So
yeah.
I was just kind of like, whatever. So right. I did that. And I had to fill out a little questionnaire. And I just kind of like, sort of winged it, wung it.
Yep.
Not go winging, yeah. So like there were questions on it that were really kind of interesting because like that might have been my first sign that this was not going to be straight up science. There was stuff like, if you had to be an animal, what would it be? And I was like, that didn't sound very scientific. But I said I would be a squid because I was full of surprises. I had my fingers and everything. And I would be chewy if improperly cooked. And so anyway, they got the tape this time, and then I didn't hear anything. So again, I said, well, that's interesting. I didn't really expect anything, to be honest. And then I got a call in it was January, middle of January. I got a call from them saying, hey, can you be out in L.A. in 3 days for 2 days? 3 days later. And I went, well, so I've got a pretty big corporate job. I'm at IBM. At the time, I was the chief scientist for design automation. And so I had a large team of people. I wasn't wasn't directly responsible for them, but I was kind of the chief guy for that. Mm-hmm. And I'm an executive at IBM, so it's kind of like buttoned down a little bit. So I've been, they've let me kind of fly pretty well. Mm-hmm. So I kind of said, gee, can I really do this? So I called the HR people and said, can I go out there even? Can I interview for this? And they said, well, as long as I'm not a competitor, sure, what the hell. So I went out there thinking that this was going to be, them quizzing me about, cell mitosis or, I don't know what.
Right.
And instead, they met, So I got met at the airport by this guy and, stuck my hand out to shake his hand, and instead he put a blindfold on me. I was like, what? WTF? What? And so then I get shuffled into a car. They were very polite, nice, but, I was like, what the hell? So somebody else, a couple other people in the car, but of course I can't see them. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course they didn't know that we could sneak a peek under our blindfolds. They weren't, it was purely cheesy. But anyway, they took us back to the hotel, and they essentially locked us in our room. Not that they took the keys, so you could get out, but you couldn't get back in. So you sort of, were there. You didn't have your phone. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, this is kind of weird. So for 2 days, they did a bunch of stuff. They made you, so what I found out is that I had been narrowed down. They had 20 finalists. And they had, I knew the process because I was involved in the show the next year. But they had interviewed a whole bunch of people. So they had a couple thousand people that wanted to be on, that did know what reality TV show was, and they wanted to be on it. So they had narrowed it down, and they were looking for, Christopher said, they were looking for people with specific kind of, they wanted, I think I was supposed to be the geezer guy, the crackpot. And, they had different, they had it was a little like Gilligan's Island on acid, kind of, there was, they had the movie star, they had the hot nurse and who's actually, we're all good, I should say, we're all good friends. So anyway, they made it, they did a lot of physical tests on it. They made it take things apart and put things back together that were pretty easy. That's the only time actually we ever saw anybody else. One of the guys actually blew up a car battery all over me, which was kind of funny. But anyway, that part was easy. What was really interesting was that they made us take a battery of psychology tests, that something called the Minnesota Multiphasics, and there was questions on it like aliens control my thoughts, and I was like, what? Well, you laugh, but what would you say? I mean, because if they were controlling your thoughts, they tell you to say no. So anyway, long story. And I went back and didn't hear anything again, and I kind of expected that I wasn't on it. And then I got a call. Actually, no, I called this because I wanted the results of this test, because I thought the test was to determine whether we were sane, and I later found out it was everybody had to have critical character flaws to be on reality TV.
Oh, gosh.
And I called to get the test, and they said, no, you can't have it because you're on the show. And I said, no, I'm not on the show. And they said, oh, yeah, you are. And they called me later and said, okay, we need you out here in 4 days. No, let's see. No, it was 10 days. They needed you out here in 10 days for 2 months. And then I said, gee, I better talk to my boss. And then I spent a couple of weeks really agonizing. Yes, I should. It's going to ruin my career. No, it's going to make, it's such a great thing to do for engineering, blah, 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 back and forth. And then the short answer is I actually two people, Diane said, John, you're going to do it. And I got a call from the number 2 guy in IBM. IBM, big company, number 2 guy there, big, is a real champion of the IBM technical community. He called and goes, we both know you're going to do this. So anyway, so they gave me their blessings. I took leave from IBM, though. They didn't pay me to do it. And that's how I ended up there.
Fantastic. So before all of this had happened, in terms of when you approached your projects, engineering projects, what have you, did you have like a mantra or, just like a method of approach, if that makes sense?
You mean like when I was building something on my own?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like before the colony.
That's an interesting... I have trouble remembering before the colony because I had to go through this brainwashing. I think I have a pattern. The pattern is commit to doing something you don't know how to do.
Okay.
And to an unreasonable deadline, and then ignore it until the last possible moment before that deadline. Then stress out mightily, hype yourself up on stimulants, drive everybody you know around you crazy, stay up really late, do it several times, break it right before it works, and then, right when you're about to give up, have a breakthrough. And that is seriously the pattern that and it's the pattern that I've tried to break, the notion that I can't get myself to work at an even pace, that I need to put myself under that stress.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I'm starting to formulate a theory here that maybe it has to do with Boston, because this sounds very familiar, John. I've seen someone else take this exact approach to everything in life as well.
Who is it?
Me.
Oh, wow. So you know what? I think there's wisdom to it. Because when you put yourself up and you set these expectations and then you can't afford to fail, it's great. But, what better training, you guys, for the zombie apocalypse?
Yep.
You don't get a lot of chances to project manage yourself. You got to think quick.
Yep.
Now, forget the fact that you might have been able to think quick 3 weeks before, but and this is again, if my kids are listening, do not copy this pattern. But and my brother is really does the same thing. But it's I hate to say it, but I don't want to say I can only be creative under stress, but I'm most creative under stress, which was really interesting. That came in handy. Though the problem is, you can't even fake yourself out. Do you find this, Rebecca? You can't say, okay, I know I'm going to do it at the last moment, so I'm going to just not chill. I'm going to chill out. I'm not going to drive myself crazy or everybody else around me, because I know I can pull it out at the end. When I do that, when I try to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to skip the stressing out part, I'm just going to do it at the end.
It doesn't
If I
work.
don't stress out, it doesn't work.
Nope,
Does
work.
that happen to you? I know. What is that? I think there's some hormonal thing.
I think so too. I think you're onto something there.
Maybe it is Boston.
Yeah. So then, with all this, did it change having to be in a survival mode, or was it just heightened stress all the time while you guys were filming?
No, it was really that same cycle, just repeated a lot with worse food. No, it was really like that. You know what was really interesting, though?
What's that?
That when I got there, to be really honest, I finally decided, okay, I'm going to go do it. I showed up, same drill. They blindfolded us, they stuck us in these places, and we really didn't get to meet everybody. We got to meet some of the people because they couldn't keep us apart because we were tricky, and we all ended up like in Allison's closet. We had figured out a way of calling out for liquor, and so we were talking. We didn't know each other, but we didn't even know that there were 4 other people that were sequestered somewhere else. But they finally, when they put us into the situation, you know, they took us out of our rooms and they kept us up for 36 hours and made us watch, you know, Mad Max movies and Terminator movies, and I was like, wait, this doesn't sound like science. And it was that element that from the first moment that they kind of strapped us in and they pointed us to an old department store and said, go in there and see what you can grab and stay in there as long as you can, which was sort of the lack of, you know, that was as much direction as we got. Mm-hmm. People came in and started hitting us with baseball bats. I went, whoa. And that stressor of being in the sort of violence that was fake, that was the fakiest part because, I mean, they were trying to copy what it would be like, you know, in post-apocalyptic, you know, maybe the zombie guys. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the guys that they hired as extras were probably, you know, had this, you know, same kind of mental challenges that a zombie would have. You know, I don't know what they were. No, they were nice, but they were hired to harass us. And that element made it very hard for me to concentrate because, you know, even though the technical challenges were real and stuff like that, that part of it initially was very hard to get your head around. And I had trouble putting myself into that. You know, I was just kind of like confused, and I had trouble putting myself into that. I really got to get this done stress mode that it takes to innovate. So for the first two weeks, I was really disoriented.
Sure.
And, you know, they really didn't, we had to make do for water and food, and they would wake us up all the time by throwing flaming things through the windows and stuff like that. And so I was just totally it was stress, but it wasn't I couldn't focus it into that creative stress, but it was the necessity part when I locked in and I realized it was really kind of the first time is where we really had to come up with a solution for water, and I went, wait, I know how to do this. That I could lock into that. Oh my God, I got to get this done because they weren't giving us water. We had to figure something out. You know?
Right.
And then so as it moved on, it was kind of a combination. There was artificial pressures. You know, we worked on a 5-day on week, and then there was a day off where we didn't get to go. I mean, we were completely sequestered. We didn't have any communication with the outside, phones, computers, food. But the camera crew would take off every 6th day. So there was this deadline that if you couldn't get something to work in that time, it either wouldn't get you. Well, you know, we didn't know what the show would be edited like. You know, the fear was, I mean, if you were lucky, it would not make the show. If you weren't lucky, because we had no idea, you know, you would be shown to fail, and there was a big fear of failure. Those kind of artificial, you know, kind of challenges would put you under certain stress. But the real stressors were we were hungry, thirsty, tired, irritated, and we really did have to protect ourselves. Even though the bad guys were simulated, they really would come and steal our food or ruin our water or take us and stuff like that. And you know, they were very clever because they would really make us mad. They would really hit us. You know, the rule was not in the face. Other than that, anything went. So you would get banged up and you would get really mad, and you know, your conscious, you know, my peace-loving nature was like, this is a hired guy. He's not really, he doesn't deserve to be hurt. At the same time, your self-preservation was, hey, I don't deserve to be hurt either. So you would really get mad, and it was weird. And those kind of stressors it kicked in I got to get this done. I got to get this weapon done because otherwise, you know, not only do I fear not getting it done and looking like an idiot, but you know what? I need this thing to keep those guys away, or to keep the food there, or to purify the water. So it generated a real life stress. But you know what? It was a very clean stress because it was on fixed boundaries. You know, I have never been, even though I had those stressors, I've not been as an adult that stress-free as I was towards the latter parts of the show, because it was very pure. And I imagine it might be like this in your day job, that I knew exactly what the challenge was. I woke up, knew what I had to get done, or knew what I hadn't gotten done the last day, knew what I had was in front of me, would work my butt off, and whether it worked or not, and when I went to bed, if I went to bed, I would know what I had gotten done, what I had to get the next day. And there was not a lot of, existential anxiety about, what did I set up the meeting minutes for that call, or, what is my, earnings per share, blah, 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 and, did I answer that email?
Right.
It was very pure. It was very pure, because I would go to sleep dreamlessly on the floor, wake up. They had to drag me out of there at the end. It was so much fun, but it was stressful because I remember, there was one week where I was sort of the foreman, and we had a bunch of builds. I was building a radio, which kind of like really climbed up the Gilligan's Island, goofy design meter, but it really worked. And I was not sure I was going to get it done because I had a key component, the high voltage component, which in the end nobody even cared about. It was the hardest thing because we didn't have the internet, or at least that they knew about. But no, we really didn't have the internet. I did manage to cobble together a computer from a motherboard that we found and a wireless thing that we found. But as soon as I did it, I felt guilty and I turned it in. Which is interesting because they thought I had figured out that Diane was going to be on the show, which I hadn't. But anyway, we never really had any outside communication, to look up what the components, what I was using for electronic components was like scrap electronics from the 80s, and every transistor looks the same. You can't, without a guide, without a catalog or internet, it was very hard.
Right.
And I had to get my head around that, so it was very stressful trying to get stuff working. But it was so much fun when it did work. And what I really liked about the show is that when, nothing works right the first time, and they really showed that process of design, iteration, screwing up better, and finally getting it right. We're not always finally getting it right, which is really important in the process.
Right.
We paid particularly close attention to your Spark Gap radio because Addie is actually going to be taking her technician license test to become a ham radio operator this coming month.
Yep.
Wow, that is real nerd pride. That's awesome. Yeah, and actually, I don't know. I used to have an amateur license back for your boy in the zygote stage. But you have to study the theory.
Yep.
And I learned. You still have to learn, resonant circuits, inductors, capacitors, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
And it was because of that.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, so we started this the beginning of this year, and I knew nothing about electronics. I mean, if anybody had tried to talk to me about them, I probably would have started sleeping. But after looking at like ham radios and people who knew how to deal with ham radios, I decided, maybe I'll just get my start in electronics by studying the ham radio license manual. And so all of my electronics knowledge to this point has been just because I've been studying the theory and kind of backtracking. So if I don't understand this well, then I go back and I research as to why I don't understand that, et cetera, et cetera.
This is from a woman who does heart surgery. That's pretty interesting. Do people know that about your alter ego? Or maybe I should spread
Some
that.
of them do, but a lot of people don't know what ham radio is. They've never even heard of it.
That's a really interesting risk, because hobbies like that, that was like, there was like a genetic marker for it, like a bad, it was like model railroads or something, or sports thing, one of these regrettable hobbies that a cousin has. But I really liked it, and I learned a lot from it. And you know what? It almost disappeared. Like many of these kind of build it kind of hobbies, but it had this whole new life because of the internet, because people were doing cool stuff that, it wasn't just like, hey, I'm going to get on there and talk. The cool thing about technician stuff is you're innovating. That's where a lot of cool stuff came from, like, being able to use a radio to make a telephone call. The first cell phones were actually amateur radio.
Right.
But when I was a ham, I learned the whole thing about how radio theory and inductors and capacitors, and I've always been a high voltage junkie. I
Tesla coils.
Tesla coils, yeah.
Yep.
So I knew how a spark gap transmitter worked because I'd accidentally been building them for years a Tesla coil is a really noisy electrical device. And it was interesting because, we had a lot of stuff there. We didn't have the right equipment, but I had a ton of AM radios. Which there were certain things that we finessed because there was all these dead cars there. So I had an AM radio, but of course we wanted to I helped Morgan make a crystal radio, diode radio.
Yep.
But, we had a real AM radio, so I was able to tune this thing in and, roughly calculating the inductance capacitance. So, to be honest, that was pretty rough. And you just had to, then you use a little clip to sort of tune it. And these things are such broad spectrum transmitters. It's like hitting a barn with a shotgun. You don't have to be that precise. And the way, so I had this AM radio that I could tune it in to about a megahertz. But the way I knew that it was working is because all of the people, all the cameramen, they were there all the time. That they'd have these earphones and they're, telling them what to do. And they would just, as soon as I hit that thing, they'd all go, ah! And so that was pretty good. The cool thing is, so it transmitted, I don't know how far, I'm sure it probably was going 20 miles out or something. And every day Lalani, I haven't really talked about my friends on the colony. I got to talk about that. But she was a really, hard worker and stuff. She wrote this long kind of, Declaration of Independence that every 9 o'clock every morning I would get up there and send out the "We are colonists. We're in a warehouse. We need medicine. We need this and that. SOS, SOS, SOS." One of the production guys said, "Hey, John, see if that's really transmitting. Do you think you should be saying SOS?" So instead, I would just get on there every morning and I'd say, "Trapped in a warehouse, please send rum. Trapped in a warehouse, please send tequila." And and that's where I learned the Morse code. So if you, Addie, if you listen on the show, I'm really transmitting.
That's great.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was really cool. But, again, it was really interesting to try to get, because it was Discovery, not Fox. We're trying to get, sorry if the Fox people are, we're trying to get the ideas across. And it was very interesting while they were editing the show to try to help them understand, you don't want to dumb it down. And, you want to illustrate it, but they picked what they thought was going to be interesting. And, I think that for the most part, they did a good job on that. They covered about a third, or maybe about half of the things that we actually built. But things like that, like the transmitter, there's an interesting part. The windows, the window glass with the capacitor, and Johnny V and I made the primary, and I used volts for the spark gap and everything. That's all fine. But the hard part was, for a spark gap transmitter, you need 10,000 volts or so to be able to bridge the gap, right? And so I had to come up with a source of that, and that wasn't easy. So I'd use an ignition coil from a car and basically make an electronic ignition. And I kind of agree with him. That was complicated. To describe how hard that was. But they said, "No, John, see, nobody needs to know that. Just tell them to use a transformer." And I was like, "But, DC doesn't do a transformer." And they said, "You nerd." No, they were very careful. They wanted to get the science they presented very right, but they also wanted to make sure that it wasn't gonna, send anybody into a coma.
Sure.
Hey, so anyway, I think that's great that you're doing the ham thing. I mean, that would make you every nerd's dream, That's great. That's great.
And that's why Whisker likes me.
Indeed. And if you want to start building model railroads in the basement, I'm okay with that, too.
I don't know about that.
That's funny.
So that's awesome. I mean, and were all of these projects that you ended up making? So there was the wood gasifier. There was obviously the water filter.
Yeah.
There was the spark gap transmitter. There was the ozonator, which used ozone to filter water, or to purify, I guess.
Yeah, that one was an interesting one. Well, let me let you get through that. You can pick a couple of them. There's stories about all of them, and there's stories about things that weren't on.
Well, and that's the thing. So for all of the projects that you had your hand in, were they just like from your brain, or was there like a book, or?
as opposed to some other part of my anatomy?
No.
I was going to say I pulled them out of somewhere. So here's how it worked. The show, for being a reality show, had a lot of integrity. So if they showed something working, it really worked.
Mm-hmm.
With various deceptions, where they finessed something, that just put something out of order. 99% of everything that they showed really worked. Everything. I was very adamant to the point of being a pain in the ass that I didn't want anything that didn't work to be shown to be working. And,
sure.
So they were very respectful of that. There were a couple of elements in the show that they said, we needed to get to, like the truck that we escaped on. That was a theme element they wanted, so they would tell us to do that. For the most part, though, the way it would work, and I imagine I could get sued for saying all of this, but that's okay. I love the people on the show, I really did. So, this was, so the inner workings of it is, as I mentioned, every sixth day was a dark day. Yep. So the camera crews took, had to have a day off because we were basically on there. We were, being observed 24 hours a day. But on that dark day, one of the production guys would come down and say, kind of thematically say, what would be good this week is, can you guys do something with power? That we want, you're going to have to build up the buildings and stuff that's being Discovery. So what would you do? And then we would go into a brainstorming session. Mm-hmm. And so they had technical staff. They had one guy in particular, Gadget Abbott, who was just a brilliant builder. And he was there in case we were going to hurt ourselves. But they didn't want to give us the answer. And they didn't, occasionally they would, I remember one time getting hot glue from them. They would, or markers, you would beg, or tie wrap. Can I have some tie wrap? And you would have to beg, and they would somehow figure out how to. But for the most part, it was like, make do with what you got. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yep.
And they would, like I said, there were themes. So, themes around communications or water or something like that. But for then we were on our own. So, like the wood gasifier is a great example. So, the water filter was an early one that was by necessity. Mm-hmm. In the end, we had to figure out some way of making water. That was pretty cool because I put, when my son passed away, we made these stones called Sam, with his name on them, SamStones. And I put one of those stones in the water filter, because actually that was the only thing I brought on set. We couldn't even bring our own clothes. Wow. So I brought a bunch of those, and I put it in the water filter, and, was talking to my other colonists, about that. They knew about Sam, but I was telling them about the stone. Yep. And the interesting thing is, one of Sam's kidney recipients, saw that, and we had sent them stones. You can't really communicate with them directly because there's a lot of pride. Right. But he had seen one of these stones, and he saw it on the show, and through that he was able to find me, and we've been able to vote organ donation, which was just amazing. We went to his wedding. Wow. Talk about amazing. So there was that was the moment where I started to get on track. And then what I think you mentioned the wood gasifier. That was probably my favorite because we had to generate power, and we didn't have a lot of fuel. We had some gasoline. We had we siphoned out of the cars. Right. We had a little bit of natural gas that was quickly exhausted, and we needed to create power because they wanted us to build stuff, and we had to weld and stuff. And what happened there is, when I was an exchange student, in my long-winded story of my past, which I hope you'll edit down to 6 sentences, when I was in Austria, I went to a party with my landlady's parents, yep. Who were, quite elderly. They've both since passed away. But during the Second World War, there was terrible fuel rationing in Austria, and they retrofit their cars to run on wood. Mm-hmm. And this was a conversation I'd had 30 years before, after lots of schnapps in a foreign language. But I was like, I think I got this. I'd really never seen it done, but I knew it was possible. Sure. And so we kind of went through this build, and like I said, the first time I built it, it didn't work. I didn't get it hot enough. And Vlad kind of said, I see what the problem is. So he built on the idea to let's lower it in. We built this thing, and we got the gas to flame, and then I was kind of like, is this really going to work? And it was really funny because it was early in the show, and I didn't know how would a failure come across. Kind of going back to that stressor point.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And we wired it together, and it was really interesting starting to get it, because there were different styles. Vlad had his style, Mike had his. He was always kind of really aggressive and stuff, and they always wanted us to fight. But he was such a great builder.
Yeah.
He got the car alternator wired up to a gas motor that we had found it was an old broken pressure washer, I think. And I rigged up this gas fire thing with Morgan and Vlad, and we put it all together. And I was like, this ain't gonna work, and it worked. And all of a sudden, I went, wait. This only happens on TV. But it was just a magic moment, and I realized at that point several things, that, wow, this could be fun, and that the production crew had no idea. They had perfect confidence that it would work. And I was like, why did you, what? So, and it wasn't like everything worked flawlessly.
Sure.
And I hope the show sort of showed that. There were some things that just never worked, that never made it on the show. But there were things that didn't work, and they did make it on the show. And I was really happy for that, because they didn't make anybody look like an idiot, I don't think. And yet showed that, you don't want to show that, every idea works, because that's totally bogus.
Unrealistic, yeah.
Yeah. And that you need to work with other people. That you need to, I'm no dummy, but I made a whole bunch of mistakes on there. And, and Mike would come up and swear at me and say, you idiot, and he'd normally be right. It was great. And it was very, it got to be a good pattern.
Oh, man. So then what projects didn't make it on?
If I told you, then I would, let's see. You know what didn't make it on? Weapons that were really dangerous. So we had this kind of weird thing. So, I'm like a peace-loving hippie guy, right?
Yep.
And I didn't even like the idea of making weapons. And, Mike made a kick-ass, am I allowed to say kick-ass?
Yep.
Yeah, he made a kick-ass crossbow that would put a sharpened piece of steel through a file cabinet. And they went, no, not going to show that. Because what we had, every marauder we killed, we had to pay for,
Yeah.
And, so we weren't allowed to hurt them any more than they were allowed to hurt us. And yet they would really make us mad. So we wanted to figure out things that would scare them away.
Sure.
Legitimately. So anything that kind of bordered on really dangerous, they would either gloss over or not show. So, for example, the flamethrower, they showed me actually doing kind of a wimpy test, which again, took several iterations. I eventually tricked it out. It went far enough that it was a pretty good deterrent weapon.
Yeah.
Not maybe the most practical weapon, but if you wanted to build something that you don't care how much you're, whether you were making minimum wage or not, you're not going to walk into that. And so, but they had a little build description, and the network said, so they showed the device, but they didn't show the build. Some of my favorite weapon, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Joey was really a great guy. Continue to be good friends with him. Was very good at security. He'd been in prison and really had a good mindset for that. He wanted to make a deterrent weapon that was non-lethal, that you would not mess with twice. So I made him an air pistol. We had a little compressor, and because we had the gas fire and then eventually solar, we had enough electricity to run this little compressor. And so it was just basically a shop air hose, small bore piece of conduit, and a little trigger. And I made this little T handle. Morgan made these clay balls. Mm-hmm. They were sun-dried, but, if it hit you, you would not do it again. It came out with that velocity. Because with a bolt, we were able to put a bolt through the side of a car. It was, and the discovery said, nah. And Morgan and I helped Morgan make an air cannon with a hot water tank that we pressurized to, I think we only got it to like 60 pounds. but we were able to fire stuff, 100 meters with no problem, including a rat carcass.
Nice.
That thing, but that was not. So they didn't show that.
I'm kind of surprised you guys didn't eat more rat.
Well, we ate some. We ate pigeon. We ate rat. We butchered a goat. I'm a vegetarian though. I'm still a vegetarian, and that was, really my first intentional meat and red meat in 30 years, maybe.
Wow.
I'm not kidding. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
I've tasted stuff, but not really just whole health. The rat thing was interesting because so this warehouse was very trippy. It was really full of junk and dirt and rats and filth. They had one tank full of, I think it was human waste. I couldn't figure out why it was there, but in our living space.
Gross.
In the work space. But the rats, they brought in rats, which they didn't need to do.
We noticed that. We raise fancy mice, and we recognize genetic traits of rodents very, very easily. And I immediately said, wait, those rats are not agouti. Those are not rats that you would find in nature. They have markings. They have recessive genes. Somebody is releasing boxes of those things to bother those poor people.
Whiskers, you cheated. No, it's true. So, but it was funny because there were indigenous rats. And the indigenous rats were mean as hell and really crafty. The pet shop, raised rats, which were actually for snake feed, I think, were much more docile, much less, clued into the ways of the world.
Yep.
And you just by making a rat whistle, you could coax them in, but that wasn't fun. So we actually had to make sure that it was the clean variety.
Sure.
But then there were times where we got our ick factor kind of went away. So we got pretty good at this stuff. But at one point, the production guys, so we got into, is this okay to say? Yeah, I think it's okay to say. We got into some really fun, initially we weren't supposed to talk to production. They'd give us a cold shoulder. They wouldn't tell us anything.
Yeah.
But, when you spend that kind of time under that kind of stress with people, they get to be your friends despite themselves. They would still, torture us and stuff like that, treat us, expose us to all this crazy stuff. But they were our friends. But we would start to escalate, and we'd start to play pranks on each other. And at one point, they put a whole family of rats in Alice's sleeping bag.
Oh, my God.
Her bedding. We didn't have real sleeping bags. And then we would put them back, and we would do all this crazy stuff. I remember I put a box with an electronic alarm on the floor outside of the production house. And at one point, I convinced them that I had gotten a camera into the production. I put up a satellite, the big helium balloon with a blinking light. Told them I had a camera on them. They believed it. It was really fun. We would. There were even times. Is this okay for me to say? I guess it is. But there were times where I would help the technical crew, with. They were doing some camera control, development, kind of building stuff, and I would say, hey, I can help with that. And so we got to be really good friends, but there was a really fine line that they, when something was going to happen, they wouldn't tell us, and they became, they were never the enemy, but it was weird.
They were unhelpful.
Yeah, and what was weird is the second season, which I don't know if you watched, but I was a technical consultant. I was called back as a technical consultant, and I was on the side of the oppressor. And it felt really weird to know what was going to happen.
Sure.
And, like, oh, my God, we're going to make them? Really? Or we're putting Ipecac in their food? And they had to sign releases for all of this stuff. Yeah, it was great.
Wow.
Sorry, second season guys, if you didn't know that.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
No, I was wondering if any of them were listening. They're all cool people. So that was fun. So I think, but you know what? Morgan and Amy both took really good notes. And Morgan kept this kind of mural kind of journal that was online, and Amy took really good notes in her notebook. We all had journals that we all kind of filled him out, but she was kind of our poet laureate. And what was fun is when we watched the show, because we never knew anything about the show, you know, how it was going to be edited. So we'd watch it with our notes, and we'd go, wait, that was out of order, or hey, they forgot that. But they, you know, with very few exceptions, nothing really I even think is worth mentioning. I can't think of anything. That well, I got an interesting story. But you know, that they would take some liberties with editing, but they never really. I mean, they would bias the way something came out, or you know how it's perceived. Like I remember Joey getting really, you know, up on the show. It looked like he was really mad that none of us were helping him haul stuff up, and he was really mad. But the scene as it was drawn out was pretty dramatized. It was all real stuff. They didn't tell us to go leave him alone. He was really mad. Really happened like that. But they can tell. They cut the thing to tell the story. They never. I can never remember them telling a story that was false. So you know what I mean? They never misrepresented what we were doing.
Sure.
But they would put it in and out, you know, different orders, stuff like that. But again, you know, they had a lot of integrity because I think it was Discovery. You know, they really wanted it to be real, and that was really important because it was really interesting watching the show. I've only watched it once. To be very honest, it was so weird to watch yourself in that, you know, being that dirty and stuff like that. It's now on Netflix, which is kind of cool, which makes me kind of go, maybe I should go watch it again. But it was so interesting watching it, reading our notes, and, you know, it was really cool. Like, I'm a real Facebook and Twitter, I'm not as big a Twitter person anymore, but I would watch the Twitter feed as people were watching it, and they would go, oh, that would never work, or isn't that cool? And then you'd be able to watch in the blogosphere about people talking about wood gas fires or stuff like that. You know, for me, trying to get a conversation going around on, you know, technology, it couldn't have been better, you know, to watch that. And it was actually an interesting show. You know, the first season was pretty successful. It was kind of like a surprise hit, you know, minor hit, you know, for that time slot. It was doing pretty well. But it broke some records for the number of people who watched it downloaded, legally or illegally, even before the Netflix thing. And that was kind of interesting. So it was kind of appealing to the same, you know, zombie apocalypse kind of crowd that you have, you know, the people who were interested in, you know, weird post-apocalyptic situations and also, you know, had their geek flag going. So that was kind of good.
Yeah, it was really nice to see some programming come up that was very, very much targeted directly at us. We enjoyed it.
But, you know, hasn't it, there's a whole bunch of that genre now, isn't there? I mean, I like I say, haven't really kept up, but I think none of them are reality, but I think there's a lot of post-apocalyptic. There was Jericho. What other ones?
Yep, there's Jericho. There's The Walking Dead.
Walking Dead, yeah.
But then, you know, for most of those, it's less engineering, more drama, you know?
Yeah,
and
like, the store is kind of post-apocalyptic in a way.
Yeah. And but we particularly liked that they focused on the engineers in the first season of The Colony because, you know, it was just lots of fun.
Yeah, you know what was funny, and one of the things that I kind of regret is some of the folks, you know, they got good feedback, but some of the focus group was, you know, kind of expected. You know, that, it's awfully convenient that you have 7 out of your 10 people know how to weld. You know, and, you know, where's the diabetic, you know, shoplift? Where's your grandmother? And so they tried, you know, the second season, you know, they picked, I think, pretty interesting people, but they didn't try to specialize on the skills.
Right.
So that made the build, you know, that limited that, and they also were complaining, I think, you know, that it was awfully convenient. Hey, let's build an electric car. Is that a 10-horsepower DC motor? Why, it is, you know. So they wanted to make it a little less convenient. I mean, and a lot of it was still fun. It was like Junkyard Wars, you know, the same things are kind of planned. But so it was much more constrained in the second season, and so it has a very different feel. It had a lot more of the violence and stuff. But you know what I really liked about the second season is that the top builder, arguably Sally, who's just a kick-ass, you know, car, really knows engines, and that was very good. I think because from a women are geeks too, as you know, Addie, right?
Yep.
And anyone listening would know. So it's really good to have in the second season that some of the strong builds were women. And in the first, but I don't think that was portrayed as much in the first, so it could have been.
I agree.
Certainly, Amy and Morgan were out there building stuff, and Lilani and Allison were helping.
Yeah.
They didn't have the technical stuff, but they were. Everybody had a job. Everybody, and sometimes I think that they would amplify, somebody sitting around. Nobody ever sat around.
Right. So can I ask a couple of questions? George. No. Dang it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure.
George, he left in the middle pretty much of the season. Was that private reasons, or was that the show just wanted to shake things up?
The latter.
Damn.
So we're all, I saw that actually in one of the blogs that somebody said, oh, he must have had a family emergency. God, this is a tell-all, isn't it? I'm sorry, Discovery. But, I think as a theme element, they'd always decided that it would be really cool to kidnap somebody, and it would be really cool to bring on somebody's significant other, but they didn't know who.
Yeah.
In both of those. And I am speculating,
Sure.
so I've never heard anyone say this, that George was, he wasn't doing the builds, but he was really good at keeping the peace.
Yeah.
And that's opposite of what they wanted, And so he was very convenient, and he didn't know he was getting taken off. We didn't know he was getting. And we were dead certain that he was going to be brought back within that week, and there was going to be some weird hostage thing.
Right.
And I remember the equivalent of the Friday afternoon. Our weeks were skewed because there were 6 days instead of 7 days. But I don't remember, but it was the end of that week, and all of a sudden I went, oh, wait a minute, because they wouldn't go across episodes, and I was like, oh shoot, they're not bringing it, they're just messing with us. And it really, it was weird, that if you remember that episode, Vlad just totally freaked out. But, as cheesy as some of our reactions were, you have to, this is one of the questions that's always hardest to answer is, did you think it was real? No, we didn't think it was real. We knew that right across the street from us was a beer distributor. We knew that there was a Taco Bell nearby, but we couldn't go there. But we were so vested in it, and we were truly under the stresses of, I lost 12 pounds, and I'm a skinny guy. I mean, Mike lost 35 pounds.
Yeah.
So we were really under those stressors, but everybody was really into the game. And, even the violent stuff, they were really after our stuff.
Yeah.
So it was an edgy game, and nobody ever forgot that it was fake, but everybody missed George. He was definitely glue. He was big going around checking on people, and he was the only person. We found an old guitar, so he would entertain us at night. Great storyteller, just a fabulous human. He's an emergency room doc, a pediatrician.
Yep.
Just a great guy. Love you, George. And he was, when he left, it really messed with us. It messed with us because we missed him, and we also knew, you start to get comfortable, right? Okay, no matter what they throw at us, we'll all sit around the dinner table and laugh about it and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, that really put a different edge on it. They're gonna mess around with us like that. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That just blew. Blowed. That was tough. I really didn't like that.
Gosh.
And it was weird. It kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but it felt like loss. And I got a PhD in loss. It was just really weird. But anyway.
Interesting.
Your second question.
Yes. So the oranges that Mike traded away, did he trade all of them?
Damn near.
Because that's like kind of a point of contention with some of the people who have watched it. I mean, we were like, he only had it, they had no idea how many oranges there were. He could have just given, 50 or something, maybe, and it would have still looked like a lot.
I can't really figure out what was up there. Hang on one second.
Sure.
I don't really know what he was thinking. Well, I think, what do I think? What we were bad at, and I think this was really interesting from a kind of zombie apocalypse, reality thing, is it's really hard to figure out who's in charge in a situation like that. You put a bunch of really high, type A people. Not everybody was that, but the guys in particular, especially the macho guys.
Mm-hmm.
Remember on the soft and crunchy one.
Right.
They were all wanted to be the boss, and it was in that situation with the traders.
Mm-hmm.
It was serious business to us in that we needed those supplies, and we knew they weren't traders, but we knew that they had stuff we had to do, and they were not going to just give it to us, and we had to figure it out. And the more one person would get exasperated with the other and sort of try to take over, the more chaotic it got. And that, I think, was pretty realistic. And Michael was just very frustrated that, I think it was Joey was in charge, trying to be in charge. And Michael just kind of thought that we were losing it. And they were playing us. They knew that they were going to
get more.
They were going to walk, and several times that they would, or we would end up with a bad deal. And he just kind of overcompensated, and that really that put a huge talk about awkward dinner conversation, because that was the only fresh food we had in 5 weeks.
Right.
There's let's see, because I remember being in the tree with George, so it was before 5 weeks. So it was something, and we were planning on making alcohol out of them. It was really hard to let go of them. And what we got in return was really it wasn't thoughtful. We got a bunch of tomatillos, and, tomato salsa. That was good. We lived on these, one observation, though, is they didn't really show our day-to-day life very much, because like any domestic thing, it gets boring after a while, but, just the effort that goes into cleaning, purifying the water to boil it all, and actually, and then cooking and cleaning up, doing laundry, all of that was so much work. And, to have something sweet to eat at the end of the day, or something, marginally delicious, I tell you how nice that was, or a sip of something, cool. Like, for example, I finally got tired because it was starting to get pretty warm, and I built a refrigerator out of a, you're a nurse. Yeah, so this was the chilling blankets that they use in hospitals?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Yeah. Hypothermia things. And they, when we broke into this hospital, we were able to grab a bunch of stuff, and they came back and they brought me a bunch of stuff. And I said, one of them was a chiller, and I went, we'll never use that. And I finally said, screw it. I want a cold drink. So I hooked up the Peltier thing and the heat exchanger from an old fridge, and actually it was you know what it was? It was you'd recognize it. It was a styrofoam box for organ transplant. And I made this kick-ass fridge. I keep saying kick-ass. It's not part of my normal vocabulary. But I made this refrigerator so I could have ice water. And the production guys said, nah. They said, that's just so over the top. So we're using wood-fired gas things to run a refrigerator. That just wouldn't be under the must-have. I went, okay. But anyway, that kind of stuff. So the oranges, getting back to the oranges, that was a blow. But you know what? I don't think Michael was actually any more in the wrong than anybody else. They were all yelling at each other and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That was really funny. I remember that scene because I walked out and they were speaking Armenian.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, I had no idea what they said. But then when I watched, the show, I walked out and they said, "Oh, it's just an old guy." And I went, "What?"
Hey now. Them fighting words.
I was like, "Just an old guy? Come on, you want a piece of me?"
You know how some snakes are very brightly colored to indicate that they're dangerous? I think that John's haircut and beard are kind of the same thing.
Well, I'll tell you what. You know what? It was a very interesting thing on that list, because I metamorphosed a bit during this thing, and I became something slightly different. I became a little less of a. I kind of let my freak flag out a little bit permanently, and became. It was okay to look a little deranged, and a little scary, and that was really fun, and that sort of, the same way that the crew there started to kind of look at me like, "What's he gonna do?" They'll think that shocked him and stuff.
That's
so
awesome.
I kind of like that, and that's good because, you want to be a badass if you're. Just because you're a geek doesn't mean that you're a wimp.
Yep.
You can quote me on that,
Yep. That's a good point. Oh, man.
One thing that I would definitely like to say about the whole idea of this show and in the way in which it relates to what we're doing with this podcast is that any sort of apocalyptic event that basically wipes out the normal every day-to-day society rules or regulations, blah, 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 is a very, very useful metaphor for teaching about why engineering is extremely important to day-to-day life in a myriad of ways that most people take for granted and never notice.
That's so much it, Whiskers, and that's exactly what I was after. And I didn't know how it was going to shape out, and I actually had a moment of doubt. I almost walked off the third day. Maybe it was even a weekend. I think it might have been a week. And actually, the producer of the show, Tom Beers, met me. It was middle of the night. He must have known I was going to bolt. And we all had that kind of moment. And he said, "No, really, we'll get to the science. It'll be okay." And in the end, it's exactly as he said, is that you see how. It wasn't necessarily any particular skill. It wasn't like, I hope it came across like this. Yeah, it doesn't hurt to have done homework, but a lot of it is just the willingness to innovate and experiment.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That whole method of design, try again, et cetera, and a fair amount of how things work is going to be really useful. And it's just like it's useful in the zombie apocalypse. It's useful, if we've got sustainability issues, if you're in an emerging world, if what other kind of when, what is that, WFHTF, when shit hits the fan. Think about, earthquakes or anything else like that.
Yep.
The whole thing about it, I didn't come away from that knowing anything. Well, that's not true. I learned stuff from Mike. I learned stuff, but the most thing that I learned is that, that you have that inner, you get inside that inner geek, and when you get into that stress thing that we're talking about, Addie, where you have that, if you turn on that, oh yeah, I can do that kind of mindset, because the people in the, no disrespect to any of them, not everybody had the same background, but everybody reacted like that in an innovative style.
Right.
What I mean is, it wasn't just the trained engineers. Everybody did, because you just sort of had to do it. And necessity is the mother of invention, and the zombie apocalypse is the mother of all necessities, right?
Absolutely. So, are there any current projects that you're working on? I know you've got talking engagements everywhere, and you've got projects coming out of your ears, probably from work and just in general. Your one spare moment is essentially while you're driving, and even we're taking.
Yeah, and I this is the moment where I turn to the camera and be brutally honest and say, I don't think I have firm control a firm lock on sanity here, because I'm looking for that next thing that would karmically, it really is, not karma, it's really dharma, it's sort of my purpose here on life, and it really comes back, it all kind of comes back to Sam, but to my kids, not just to Sam. So I'm really always looking for that next, what could really help. And sometimes that makes me take on too much. But to answer your question, I have just for the third year rehabilitated a giant 20-foot pumpkin robot, pneumatic pumpkin robot.
Awesome.
If you look up a haunted forest in Williston, Vermont, it's called Project X.
Okay.
That's pretty cool, and it starts about 6 feet tall, and it rises up, and it has radio-controlled 8-foot pneumatic arms that you can move around, and then when you talk, it moves its, meter-wide saw, and
nice.
That's cool. What else am I making? I'm making, what am I doing? I was helping my son last night on a upscale, do the lighting in an upscale bar in New York City. That was fun.
Oh, cool.
What else have we done lately? I'm helping. Oh! I'll tell you what. If I can use, shamelessly promote something that we're doing.
Absolutely.
As a concept, not as a particular thing. One of the things I really believe in is if you're trying to get, kids or anybody else, interested in stuff, is to, it's one thing to read about it in a book. It's another thing, to watch it on TV. But you really gotta. My experience is most people learn better by doing. Not everybody, and so. There's this kind of cool movement. The thing that's so awesome right now about being a geek is that, with the internet, there's this whole do-it-yourself DIY culture, that's going on, magazines, constructibles. You got to make magazines. You got to get Dale Darty on this thing. He'd be an awesome guy to have on the zombie apocalypse.
Sure.
But if you, all of those how-to-do-it sites and Maker's Fair and all of the stuff, people are, throwing ideas back and forth on how to make stuff work.
Right.
And what we are doing, my big project right now is I'm helping set up 2 what are called maker spaces or hacker spaces or fab labs.
Yep.
So these are, you in the big city, you have those things growing out of your ears, but we don't have that kind of stuff where I live. This is where you have like laser cutters and 3D printers and stuff like that are open in a controlled way to the public, and so we're setting up some of those. So
awesome.
Vermont has that. Yeah. So that's a huge project, and that's less about building a thing.
Well, that's a big project, though. I mean, that in and of itself, setting up, it's making something that can help make other things, which I think is perfect.
That's a great way of looking at it. Well, in a weird way, Addie, what I am about is making things that can make other things, but they just happen to be people. Well, I'm not making people. I guess I am making people that can make people, but I don't mean that.
That must be a very impressive laboratory for making people.
In just 7 days, I can make you amazing. Okay.
I was thinking adult film, but that's slightly different, I suppose.
I'm not going to go there. No, I will tell you that particular, the 2 industries, the adult film industry and the electronics industry, have gone so hand in hand, if that's the right word, that many innovations in digital technology, in bandwidth and storage have been brought to you courtesy of the adult film industry. And I am most appreciative of that because, the industry, seriously, we wouldn't have the kind of bandwidth if people really were just sending text messages on their phones. But it's really something. That's an interesting thing because that brings up a good point is where technology meets other cool stuff like the art and music.
Yeah.
That's where it's really fun, or craft, and that's where I'm really excited. And I think even where technology meets zombie killing, I think that there's some real innovations there and efficiency that we could come up with.
Yeah. I agree. Oh, man.
All right, Eddie, are you ready to do your weekly grilling of the guest with the little last part of the show here? We like to keep a little bit uniform from show to show.
Yes. So I do I want to say just a few questions. So, let's see. What do you think the future of engineering is? I mean, it's a very broad topic, obviously, but from the DIYers to the hackerspaces, where do you think engineering should be going or is going?
Should be going. Can I answer should be going?
Absolutely.
I think is going. I think is going is always going to be. You know, you can't sugarcoat the fact that engineering is such an interesting trait. So I think it's really cool. You know, if you ask people about engineering, most of what they hear was that it's that it's hard and you have to be good in math and science, and that's a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what it should be doing is it should be more about relevance, social relevance. And I don't mean that in a, just a, wave your flag kind of, what I think is that if you look at some of the issues that are facing the world right now, in environment and energy and stuff like that,
mm-hmm.
a lot of the issues you could argue were caused by technology. But,
sure.
I think, that people are going to start seeing, they are starting to see that, that engineering, technology, math, science, can be great tools in helping bring across, whether it's clean water or which is really important because things like water or oil, energy things, they not only do they have, first order repercussions, some of the, for health or economies, but they also cause wars and stuff like that. So, and I'm not oblivious to the fact that there will always be strife in the world and stuff like that. But I think that if you can make engineering more socially relevant and get more people to see that that's a good way to make a difference in the world, and that will lead to people realizing that they can make a good living.
Mm-hmm.
That said, you still got to be pretty flexible because the economics of the world are not controllable. There a lot of jobs do move to lower cost, and it's interesting because you can now see jobs moving from places like India and China to the next, I'll for lack of a better word, exploitable workforce,
sure.
while those workforces kind of levelize and become more expensive. That's inevitable, and so the wrong thing to think about is whether there's just jobs there. That's a key issue. So I think that if we can make engineering more socially relevant, and I don't mean by just spray painting it, greenwashing it, then, isn't it cool, but by actually getting people to apply engineering and to be seen to apply engineering to these kind of world issues, it will make a much bigger difference. And especially because those kind of jobs tend to be localized, so they aren't typical. So that's what I'd like to see. One of the things that does trouble me is I do think that we need to get, engineering, in this country, in the U.S., engineering is pretty respected, but you don't really get, Steve Jobs or maybe Dean Kamen. There aren't that many recognizable names that you would say are engineers. Neither of those guys are actually, Kamen is definitely an engineer. But, and there are parts of Europe and, Eastern Europe in particular where engineering is considered, quite a prestigious.
Mm-hmm.
It bugs me that something that requires that much discipline and hard work is still considered kind of, it doesn't have the luster, say what we will, say medicine or law. And
mm-hmm.
I don't get that because it's really, it's hard. And
yeah.
so I would hope that as we as engineers, apply ourselves more into problems that the world really needs and really kind of, that those perceptions will start to change. I'm not kidding myself. I think you only get that, you can only change those kind of images when you deserve it,
Yeah.
So but I'll tell you, this whole DIY thing, it is so, do I sound like too much of an adult if I use the word empowering? I think when you teach somebody how to make something of themselves, they can design on a computer and hold it in their hand in 5 minutes, I think that taps into this collective creativity in such a cool way that I think that even if people don't identify themselves as engineering, they're doing engineering or doing design. What I really like is the how design, with a capital D, is actually becoming more important in what we normally think of engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody gets paid to get the answers in the back of a book. It's every real engineer is working to solve a problem that hasn't been solved before.
Right.
And I think the more that things that design is a component, whether it's sustainability, whether it's appeal. Look at the Apple products. I'm an IBMer, but I have great respect for what Jobs and everybody and the rest of the company has done, because the componentry that they have is nothing special, but they've really designed the experience, not just the industrial design, the look,
right,
but the whole experience. And I think if kids start to see that, it's like an artistic expression. It's like poetry. I know that's geeky, but designing something cool, making that spark gap transmitter is every bit as transcendent as writing a sonnet. I would give you.
Sure.
I dare you to prove to me that there's been a sonnet written that somebody was more pleased with than when that damn thing worked.
Yeah. It's actually interesting because there's a band called Architect, and they use Tesla coils in their music. And
I know that.
Yeah. So,
as a matter of fact, my friend Scott works with Steve Ward, who is the coil guy. As a matter of fact, we just you'll probably see Facebook pictures of the smaller spark. I try to build coils that I can carry around, but I love Architect. But did you say you knew them?
No. Just that because I think they performed at.
They've been brought up a few times on the show at this point. Yeah. A lot of our guests are engineers and frequent things like Maker Faire and Open Hardware Summit and whatnot. And so many of them have seen these guys live.
Yep.
Can I ask you a question? I've never seen them live, though they were at Maker Faire the last couple of years. But what I'm working with a mutual friend of theirs and mine, I'm trying to make the best Tesla coil that you can fit in a suitcase, which is interesting because since 9/11, when I fly with my gear, it's always kind of weird because I always use the argument, look, if I were going to make something horribly dangerous, I wouldn't make it look horribly dangerous, right? And I go, oh, yeah, okay. So I'm trying to figure out how much spark can I get out of something that comes out of a suitcase. So, and spending a lot of money with burning out things with that. But anyway, I think that kind of stuff is showing people that kind of wow factor is just amazingly important.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Can I ask you a favor? You talk about those themes. I'd like to know some of that. Maybe offline you guys could tell me some stuff that you're hearing a lot from your guests, because that might be useful in some of the way I approach some of the kids outreach.
Yeah. Sure.
So that was cool. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we know a lot of people who work with FIRST and have done, local outreaches in terms of like robotics with Legos and things like that.
I mentioned Cayman. I think that's one of the two things, maybe the three things that I kind of respect the most in terms of promoting the engineering ethos. One is FIRST. The other is Mythbusters.
Yep.
I just absolutely adore. And again, I don't even watch the show. And I don't watch any shows. Not that I really think it's great.
Yeah.
And the last one is with Steve Jobs. I mean, in terms of making design as a discipline.
Yep.
That's just incredibly cool.
One thing that tends to be missing a lot these days, and not just in terms of engineering, but in all of the truly useful Renaissance arts, is that our society's attention span has been whittled away to the point where media only ever presents things in sound bites. So one of the core things that we wanted to do with this show was to provide a long format, which is more of just a conversation with engineers, to actually allow them to have time to convey complex ideas across, which you just can't do in between commercial breaks.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. What did you say? No, I think you're right. And I think actually that I was at a grown-up meeting today. I told you about the zombie.
Yep.
No, I just told you that before we started talking. But I was at a grown-up meeting today, and we were talking about that attention span and how interesting it is generationally. So, talking about my generation, my generation doesn't have the filters that younger people have. That's why sometimes the internet is bewildering to people of my vintage, or things like Twitter or something like that. And I think that we as a society there's so much noise out there that it really shortens the amount of time that we spend on anything. On the other hand, I think when you develop, when you look at your own kids, or look at my kids, they're very good at filtering out and going to what's interesting or cool or neat or, necessary. And they're much better, I think, organically at being able to filter that. And so what we call sort of attention span, I don't know if it's, that's an interesting thing about attention span is I think about it. Some of the most creative people I know would have what would be classically called ADD, that they're interested in everything and kind of like, looking around all the time. And I think that, I guess the thing I'm saying here is that I think that sometimes we're too quick to point out that somebody is distracted or, is taking in too much stuff and not able to focus. I don't necessarily know. I think it's a different pattern of thinking, and different people react well to that, different people don't. But I'm glad that you have listeners that will listen to a long time. Except I bet you don't have any listeners that will listen to that whole story of my youth.
I don't know.
You might be surprised. Our listeners almost uniformly complain if we actually stop the show at an hour and interrupt the guest. They're like, why did you turn that off? We know you guys kept talking after you turned off the tape. Why isn't it part of the podcast?
That's funny. We promise listeners we'll stop talking. We'll never speak again without you. We promise.
So, gosh, okay. I normally ask what the first system you would set up at your zombie apocalypse bunker would be, but I'm going to guess it's water filtration, unless you have another system.
Well, this week we're talking to somebody who's
done it.
Has actually set up the first couple of steps of what one would need to in a zombie apocalypse.
The interesting thing is, I would actually start with physical security. You need to get your perimeter controlled, because otherwise nothing matters.
Sure.
Zombies or bad guys. So I think I would start with physical perimeter, just a first order, and then set up some sort of guard duty. I guess with zombies, you just need to, they aren't that smart, but you do need to pop their heads off.
Yeah.
Then water. What was really interesting about that is the way that these things presented themselves was very natural, because, you can live weeks without food, maybe 2 or 3 weeks without food, but you can, 2 days without water, you're starting to hurt. 3 days, you can go into convulsions.
Right.
And what's funny is we never got down to unsafe levels of water, but we would ration to the point where, things got really difficult. So hygiene, let's just say, suffered. When you don't drink enough, your body just doesn't work all 100% right. I'll spare you the details, but it became it's an essential thing. So I would say physical perimeter,
okay,
safety, and then I would say water, and then I would say light. That was really important, because it became really scary to us, because we had flashlights, and of course the batteries wore out, and we'd say,
yep,
say to the production, hey, we're out of batteries, and they would go, yeah, we are. What are you going to do about it? And so that kind of thing was just pretty interesting. And then what else after that? Somewhere in there, I do a talk called Lessons from the Colony, where I talk about, what I would learn. Somewhere in there, no matter how grim it was, I would try to make something fun, music or a game, board game, because you can't, that's one thing. Even when things are really hitting the fan, you need to have fun.
Yeah. Yep.
And I guess weapons would be in there somewhere, but, weapons with zombies, what would I do? I remember, what would you want? I think I'd want something, let's see, if you had something with projectiles, that would be hard to reload, because you don't really have weapons.
Yeah.
I think I'd build big knifey things, but, gosh, I don't really know. I'll have to go experiment. I'm thinking big knifey things.
Get back to us on that, would you?
Yeah, zombies don't really have pain sensors, do they?
No, not really.
They don't really have the normal self-preservation stuff. So that might be a little hard. Let me think about that. I did say, I remember saying in another interview that I was going to make flaming spears that were long enough to stick through so you didn't end up having flaming zombies walking. So I thought that was so good.
You got to think about things like that. You don't want your bunker to go up in flames either.
Absolutely.
And then, let's see, the 3 tools you would bring to your zombie apocalypse bunker.
Definitely a knife is really nice to have.
Okay.
I think I'm going to be pretty boring here. Let's see. Let me try to be not boring on one. I would say a knife, a big ass knife. I would bring out something to create flame easily, and I'm very partial to these magnesium bricks that you can shave and then light because they work really well. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's good. And then what would I say? What did I miss the most? I think what I missed the most is a pair of good pliers.
Okay.
So like a Leatherman or a Gerber or something like that.
Oh, okay. If I could have a Leatherman, that would cover the knife. So if you could let me do that.
Yeah.
One of our favorite answers to this question involved a 3D printer.
I'll tell you something funny about that, Whiskers, because I would go decidedly low tech. One of the things that was really interesting as a transformational moment is that all of a sudden I realized, you know what? I'm not going to have everything here. We all complained a lot. I don't have the internet. I don't have a catalog so I can look at these transistors. Michael would say, I don't have these tools. And they kind of said, guys, get over it. And there was something very liberating about, okay, we're going caveman here, and we're going to do it what we can. So, 3D printer. I would bring, everything I kind of thinking about is sort of weird.
This is interesting because, this is a guy who essentially, with just a little bit of fire, was able to build a small power system, and with the small power system was able to build a big power system. So, yeah, all John needs is a knife and some magnesium.
Well, that's what I'm trying to think about is what were the irreducible things? Because you can usually build stuff up. Do you know? I'm not quite putting the right words on this, but the right kind of survival book could be really helpful. There is a book, and so I think you probably saw this, but there was a small library there, and some of them totally stupid. Like I remember we had a book on psychedelic mushrooms, not really high on the list. And we had a book on what else did we have? African crafts. But we had a book that I actually had called Back to Basics, which was a kind of a homesteader book. But back from the 70s, I think. But it was really good. It was like, it had some great how to do it. That's where we got some of our bread recipes and how to make cheese, and some we're going to learn to make cheese. So some of those kind of things where there was some certain knowledge that you didn't have that would be a reference. The problem is you never know what you need. But when I think about what was the most useful to us that we couldn't make up, fire, a cutting tool / gripper thing, and I would have to say, a survival book like that had some recipes like, okay, I know how to make soap, but I didn't know the proportions.
Sure.
And something like that was just had a home remedy book like they used to have in every house at the turn of the last century. Something like that was incredibly useful. It sort of saved you a lot of experimentation. I know that doesn't sound very sexy, but as you say, Whiskers, if you can build up layers of stuff, you don't necessarily, I would bring a generator because you don't really know what you're going to have to burn. So it's better to get there and say, look around. I mean, I'll tell you what, this still happens. So I was sitting outside at Taco Bell in Northampton, Massachusetts, I guess, where my brother went to school. And I'm looking around, and I swear when I look around, I still look around and I go, what would I use? It's a game. I mean, when I go into a hardware store or go to a dollar store, I look around, and I'm looking around, and there is no better hardware store in the world than a wrecked car or a car that you can wreck, because it's got wires, it's got relays, it's got batteries, it's got springs that you can sharpen into just nasty machetes. It's got strapping. It's got insulation that you can make bedding out of. It has lights that you can actually use for lighting.
That's a good point.
It has heating elements for this, for the cigarette lighter. It has, a generator and an alternator. It has high voltage stuff in it. I'm trying to think what all the stuff that we took out of cars. I mean, I now, when I walk in, I kind of go, it's got raw metal, lots and lots of pieces of metal that you can actually use. You're even making small knives out of a frame, out of the body panel.
Mm-hmm.
Or you go to any store, I go to a grocery store and I say, okay, chemically, what could I do? And it really is a fun game, but there's so much stuff that you can sort of bootstrap off of.
Cool.
And that's what engineering is really all about. It's about building the things that allow life to be, allow us all to spend more time doing the things that we want to do and less time spending the time on doing what we have to do. And bootstrapping up is exactly that. You can start from essentially nothing, and in a few months' time, you can have a fully functioning society.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the interesting things about that is that, it isn't always that straight, it just goes swimmingly past. Sometimes there's a trial and error thing. And one of the things, this is an interesting message, that, I always try to tell kids that it's okay to fail, which is interesting because sometimes I forget to tell myself this, in my work situation, but that the whole idea of trial and error, we really choke that out because, we're told that, failing is failing and failing is bad. But one of the interesting things about a situation like that is when you don't know what you're doing and you're just trying a bunch of ideas, you essentially have to fail to learn.
Right. I
would tell people not to get so hung up about it. I don't know if you saw the end of the first episode where I was outside in the rain naked.
Yeah.
And that actually, I'm sitting there. I didn't know that was actually going to be on there. I always tell people, don't be afraid of failing. Don't be afraid of making a mistake or making yourself an idiot, because I did not think that was going to be on TV. I was filthy dirty. It started raining. I ran outside. I turned around to this guy with the camera, and I went, no, you wouldn't. And he says, I picked that sheet. And it, I didn't even know that was going to be there until 2 days before the show. I got a call from the New York Times, and he wanted to interview me, and all he wanted to know about is, tell me about the last 45 seconds of the show. And I said, I haven't seen it. And he went, oh. so armed with that, I always tell people, don't be afraid of making that big a mistake, because I was thinking, oh, my boss saw it, my kids saw it, my parents saw it, oh, my God. And my career's only gotten really, be careful about saying my career, but my public career has only gotten better because of that. So you get really afraid of making mistakes. I think that's one of the engineering lessons is, embrace those mistakes.
Yeah, I agree. I make plenty of them.
It's very easy to forget that we're all just people. We all need to take showers.
Even the undead.
So, quick last few questions. The best of the colony, the worst of the colony, and anything that you would redo.
Best of the colony, super, super easy. Diane showing up. So,
nice.
Week 8, things were really stressful. The whole scenario was that there was less stuff to go around. So we were getting harassed a lot. could go out to get water. And so it was really stressful. And we had a bunch of builds going on.
Mm-hmm.
And what were we building? I think it was it the radio week? I don't know what I was building. But I had no, it was around that week. But I had really spent a lot of time on something. I think it was a high voltage thing. Mm-hmm. And I had really over-programmed my week, and it was, George had been gone for a couple of weeks. Things were really stressful. I was having fun, but it was stressful.
Sure.
And I remember Leilani said, "John Cohn, your wife is here." And my first reaction was, "How do you know my last name? We never used our last name." And I looked at her and said, "What did you say? We're in L.A. I was the last person. They're all from L.A.
Yeah.
So I ran up the stairs and I threw open the window. We had this window that we could look out.
Yeah.
All the cameras are on me, and there's my wife. She's with a bunch of actors. They don't even know that she's not an actress.
Mm-hmm.
It's my real wife. And they're all looking at me, and the first thing out of my mouth is, I think I said, "It's you." And then I said, "Who has dogs?" Who has the dogs? Not even, where are the kids? Who has the dogs? But then she came in, and I was crying. I was so happy. I love her a lot. And she smelled good, and she's a great cook, a great engineer, and it really helped to have her there. So that was definitely the high point. Low point, actually, it was funny because the moment that she came in, the production guys took it out on us that we hadn't invited the other vagrants that were with her in because they don't have the food with us.
Yeah.
So they opened a valve and flooded the bathroom that we were using. We didn't have water, so we would flush the toilets every so often with wastewater, with the water that we'd use for cleaning and dishes and stuff. Mm-hmm. But usually full of what toilets are usually full of. And so they flooded the toilets into our bedroom.
That was a gross moment.
That would have been really bad, except that I had Diane, so that wasn't really bad. I'll tell you the worst moment for me was just kind of a nameless moment where it was in the first week or so. It was that moment that I almost walked out. I just thought I missed my family so much, and I couldn't really get my head around the violence part of the show, and I hadn't really gotten into the science groove yet, and I didn't think that it was going to be worth it. Here I had gone out on a limb and left my job for, people thought I was nuts. Here I am, middle-aged exec, straight-laced guy. What the hell was I doing? And they were going to be right. Mm-hmm. And I really felt low, and when I almost walked out, and I think that was it. And I can't even put a date on it.
Sure.
But it wasn't a thing. That was the hardest. I would put that as the low, even though it was kind of a quiet low.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then anything that you would redo if you had the chance?
Gosh, you made me think. Maybe we should eat more rat. There was a couple of things I wanted to build, which I wish I had done. There were a couple of builds. Let me say this kindly. There were a couple of builds that I had intended, and other people, I had great respect for everybody, but there's a lot of ego associated with these builds, mine and everybody else's, right? And so when somebody would get their hands on something, you'd want to kind of let them run with it. But there were a couple of things that I really wanted to do that I never got around to doing because there were a couple of weapons things, like cannon things I wanted to make. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to make. We had this satellite dish, and I had put some mirrors on it, and I was using it as a solar oven. I could, get a piece of wood to light in it just about instantly.
Nice.
And the problem, of course, is that you had to pivot it to track the sun. Well, when we made the solar tracker, so I made this tracker. I helped Morgan and I built this little thing that Mike and Joey built this really cool frame. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw the solar thing, but the solar thing was kind of weird because like they said, essentially we're tired of watching you chop wood for that wood thing. Can we do something more interesting like solar? And I was like, what? Nobody's going to believe that. They pointed up, and sure enough, there was every 10th building or something had solar panels. So they let us actually break in and steal real solar panels from a real building. I don't know how that works. So Joey and Michael made this really cool framework because we didn't have enough electricity to weld with this cheesy welder we had, so that the things could pivot back and forth. And then I made with Morgan this solar tracker, and I really wanted to hook that solar oven up to the tracker so that it would track the sun too. And then we'd actually have a way of boiling water and stuff like that. I really thought that would be a good build, and it kind of got away from me. Somebody else wanted to work on it. So, okay. And there was a couple other things like that but you know what? It was a lesson in letting go, because you can't, if you hoarded all the stuff to yourself, you would fail. You know what I mean?
Right.
Nobody has enough time to do all those things. So is that what I would redo? What else would I do? No, I think I really, I got to say, I really like the way they portrayed me. They made me seem like a much nicer person than I really am. No, I don't know. I really don't have any regrets on the way it all played out, even with the mistakes. I really like it. I know it was cheesy, but it was so much fun. I think that's it. So only things like that.
Yeah. I think, for all the people who we've talked to, because I've been talking nonstop about our engineer friends needing to watch The Colony. They're probably getting sick of it, actually. But for all the ones who have watched, so far they've been saying, oh, that John dude.
Yeah, I think
awesome.
Everybody immediately said, yes, that's somebody who would probably enjoy coming on to Zombie Tech. And
and I really have liked this, you guys. I mean, no, honestly, anybody who's going to listen to something that has the word zombie and tech, I mean, that's like, that's like made to order. And I really like the zombie. I like the zombie part of it because, it's fun to think of a disaster that is, that's fun. It's got a kind of a supernatural component because it's really hard to think of real disasters. But, the same shit hits the fan kind of stuff happens. It's really, it's useful. I think it's both fun and useful because, when you think about that, scenarios like that actually occur in the world and keep occurring, right? So it's actually fun to think of it because that thought exercise, I really think I'd be better at this because of going through what I just went through.
Sure.
And I think people watching it, if you just get that click, it's not so much what you know how to do. It's really the knowing how to turn on that I'll figure this out button in your head, not the throw up your hands and go, ah.
Yep, I agree.
So thank you very much, John, for joining us this week.
Oh, it was awesome. I can't wait to go back. And do you guys have like an archive so I can go back and listen to other geeks?
Yep, yeah. Absolutely.
For everyone out there, you can download the show and all of the archives at zombietech.tv. They're all just listed there very conveniently. And is there any websites that you want people to be aware of, John?
Oh, wow. Yeah. One is I'm a big Facebook addict, and so if you want to talk, just find me on Facebook. And I blog every night, and you are going to be part of the blog tonight. It's on johncohn.org. I know that's also a ridiculous name, but that's where I put a lot of my links for talks and outreach stuff. So if you have ideas for like how to reach kids in particular, or how to fend off zombies, or how they can be most tastefully prepared for dinner, I would like to know. And I guess the one thing I would say is, I mentioned, my three boys, Sam in the middle. We do have a memorial site for him, and we make these stones that are like in a water filter. It's SamStones.org. That's SamStones. If you go on there and there's a link that says "Want SamStones," we'll send you some. We have a map of where they are in the world. They're all over the place. But if you're in some exotic place and you're thinking about the zombie apocalypse, go on that link, SamStones.org, and we'll send you some stones, and you can put them someplace cool in your maybe in your bug out bag or whatever it is that you need for the zombie. If worse comes to worse, you can throw a stone at the zombie. At least they will be done.
New exotic location, zombie brain.
Yeah, there you go. You can, while they're puzzling over the cryptic writing on the back, you can chop off their head.
And we'll definitely include links to all of that stuff in the show description. So if you want to easily get over there, just check the description and click on through.
Yep.
And what's that website again?
Zombietech.tv. And again, for John's stuff, it's John Cohn, JohnCohn.org. So,
all right, that's it for me. Eddie?
Awesome, guys.
Yeah, I think that's it for me, too.
All right, thank you again, John. Next week, I'm not sure who we're going to have because we're actually recording this one a week early, so I guess it'll be a surprise.
Yes.
But, yeah, thanks for listening, and you can tune in again next Thursday. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye. Bye. Watch out for zombies.